Around 6 years ago, a couple came to see me in my office, and they had been coming to my class, my Wednesday night class, uh, actually separately before they had met, and then later together when they decided to get married. And actually, an interesting thing, I mean, this may be somewhat of a commercial for this class, but it's a little twist, an interesting twist. This fellow had brought her on a date. They were on a date, and he decided to bring her part of the date to my class. And he told me afterwards that this is a great class to bring a date to because it's definitely going to provoke some reaction. And you can find out about somebody very quickly. If they absolutely have no reaction, that also is a statement. So then I heard it from several other people. So this is just as an aside. If you ever have in doubt about the guy you're or the girl you're dating, you bring them here and see what happens. You don't have to tell me what the results are. Anyway, but it came to me, and this was their dilemma, a common dilemma, which is that they were married then for 3 years, and they didn't seem to be able to maintain any called domestic tranquility. And they were fighting all the time, and how these things begin slowly, and then they begin to eat away at you. They were saying that really, even though they felt they still had feelings for each other, they didn't forget their initial honeymoon and romance, but they didn't seem to be able to work it out. And as things got worse, they each began to question whether the other person was really their partner. They're at the point where they try different therapy, marital therapy, and other forms, alternative methods, and so on. And they really were ready to make the decision, mutual decision to divorce. They both were young, and they felt they had a bright future ahead of them. And since they, in a way, one of them at least started their journey through my class, they respected me. So they felt that before they really make the decision, maybe I have something to say, something I could share with them that maybe be helpful. They didn't want to leave any stone unturned, so to speak. So I was saying with them, you never know in these situations as a speaker, in a very general sense of the word, whether two people are really meant for each other and they just don't have the tools, or they're not meant for each other. And how do you really determine a thing like this? So sometimes you can go by instinct. Others have what they call Ruach HaKodesh. They have the ability to see, I guess it's not a crystal ball thing, that people will be able to see the spiritual destiny of things. But as they say in that world of the masters of Ruach HaKodesh, those who are able to see things like that those that know don't say, and those that say don't know. Now they say that about Kabbalah, about all the deep secrets. The people who advertise or who make it too public that they have that ability usually invoke it. So, as I was saying with them, I was just asking different questions. And what did become apparent, sometimes you ask the right question and you hear a reaction. And I had an instinct that they was the former situation, that they were meant for each other, but they didn't really have the tools. Not that I could guarantee it, I wasn't even ready to share that with them, but it was what I felt inside. So I said to them, exploring some further issues, I said to them certain things which I'm going to share with you tonight, and that provoked them to think a little about what their standards were, about relationships in general. And since they were both sincere, which is of course a critical element, unfortunately, most situations when you counsel couples or individuals, problem is that the people are their own worst enemy. Meaning that even if people want to solve their issues or problems, but there are too many blocks, they can't even look at themselves in an open way. They're always blaming others. Here, what was healthy, that was very good sign from my point of view was not that they had their problems resolved, but they weren't blaming each other. He wasn't like saying she's the problem and she wasn't saying he's the problem, which is a very good sign. Usually, both people do that. At least one. To get to a situation where no one's doing that is always a very good sign, because at least you can go further and explore and see how far you can go. So recognizing that, and that may have been also an element of my own judgment call, I decided to push it further. Since they didn't have that issue of blaming and accusing and the insecurity that comes with it, they truly, sincerely were looking for the truth and what is right. So we began to explore it, and I spent with them several times. And an interesting thing happened. This is, I said, around 6 years ago. Interesting that happened was they began a new journey with each other that came through crisis and difficulty. Today, they are not only happily married, but they already have teenage children. At that point, they didn't even have children. They weren't even thinking. They were afraid to have children. And above all, they are a real paragon, a model for a loving couple. So if you would meet them today, you would never know that they went through anything like this. Not that they're ashamed to share it. They talk about it when necessary. And today they are true soulmates. And it's very obvious to anyone that sees them, anyone that enters their home. And they've dramatically changed. So of course, to me, this was a very, I'm telling you a success story. There are many other types of stories. So when you look at a success one, which aren't always so common, you try to study the dynamics of what happened here. And what they actually told me, which I understood as well, was that when they met, they didn't even know what the word soulmate was. And when they were about to break up, they thought that this was not their soulmate. And they came to discover they were truly soulmates, which is when they obviously were able to work through all their issues and problems. I tell the story because it's a real life story. And as I said, I'll share different aspects of it as we go along. And I thought it's a good way to begin with a case study, so to speak. All of you here are old enough to have probably dated once in your life or more, right? So I'm sure some of you probably dated more than once. You met more than one person in your life. Everyone has their own story. Some of you may have met someone that you thought was the right person for you, and then in time you figured out it wasn't. Some of you may never have met that. Everyone's got their saga. I'm sure some have been deeply hurt, and some maybe have not been so hurt. I'm sure some of you have also lost trust or even faith or hope that you can probably find somebody. Once you're hurt enough times, you don't want to be vulnerable again. These are obviously generic statements, and I can't really apply to any individual here. I'm just using my own experience and knowledge to define and see, I'd rather express different scenarios that are possible in the spectrum of human relationships. But the question is it possible that you may have met your soulmate and you did not know it, and you may still not know it? Now that's a very heavy question nobody likes to really talk about. Because if that's the case, then the question is, what's wrong with us that we couldn't recognize something that was meant to be? I'm not trying to throw doubts into your mind. I'm sure you have enough of your own. You don't need mine to add to the equation. But in the context of relationship, it's important to know these things, because if you're not ready to look at yourself soberly and brutally even, and I don't mean to beat yourself up, I mean in a healthy way, a secure way. Really, that is the death knell of any future. A person is unable to look at themselves in a serious way and even with a critical way. Again, not through self-annihilation. That is to me the worst scenario of all, because then what are you working with? You don't have anything to work with. And unfortunately, part of the so-called consequences or symptoms of failed relationships is that you begins to erode your own self-confidence And as a result, self-questioning yourself, second-guessing. And that ultimately creates an environment in your own life that's sometimes difficult to look at yourself entirely. Easier to point at others, or blame parents, or blame God, or always above all to blame the other person. Yeah. And finally, of course, there's some, I don't know if it's last resort, but many people come to the conclusion, or they feel they come to the conclusion, that there's an evil spell on them, a nine har, that because they tried everything, and if not working, there must be some type of spell. And what a nine har is, how do you translate that? Evil eye, curse. And I heard this from enough people to know this is not an exception, that people feel that way. And I mean, just for the record, the true people understand what ein hara will tell you. That ein hara can only affect those that believe in it. I don't know if you ever heard that, because this is very much about the power that we have within our souls, and that really no one has power over you. So when anyone tells me that it's a curse or a spell or something like that, the first question I ask is, how do you know that? Because I tried everything. But who decided you tried everything? You decided you tried everything. It's a very subjective statement to say, I've tried everything. You have to have someone objective whether you actually tried everything. And when I say everything, it doesn't mean going to the farthest extreme. So to really answer this question, because this is the questions I posed here, and many others, which, and I said, affects all of us, because there's no one on earth, and therefore no one in this room, that is immune to the need for love. We both need love, and we both need to love. It's inherent part of human personality. Do some people have maybe cut off that part of themselves because they've been hurt or because they're afraid? That's possible. Listen, you could also shut your eyes and keep your eyes shut for 10 years. It doesn't mean that it's healthy. Many of us maybe don't allow our own faculties to be functioning to the fullest for whatever reason. But the natural human being, a child, from birth, and that's when you know it's inherent, needs to be loved and needs to love. What the word love is of course a big word, the mysterious word called love. But it's definitely part of who we are. Whether it's a combination of companionship, intimacy, sexuality, validation, the list goes on. It's probably all that and more. And of course, it's something that always remains somewhat mysterious, because the fact is no one has ever mastered it. Many books, as you may have read about it, I mean, as they say, the more bestsellers there are about love, the more the science that's not working. Because if it was, what do you need another book? So clearly it's something like that elusive search for so many other things that are elusive. And not to suggest that the books that are out there and different so-called how-to manuals and workshops don't have insights. Many of them do. But overall, we definitely live in a world where there's a lot of crisis in this area. So even in all ages and all generations, it was always a challenge. The Talmud says, after all, which I know is one of the favorite lines from many of the singles in the Mecca of single life in New York, called the Talmud, that says that finding a shidduch, finding here a match, is like as difficult as parting the sea. So you've heard that statement. And you never heard that statement? Okay. Well, if you haven't heard it, some people will tell you they know it from experience, not necessarily you need to know from the Talmud. So this is in all times, especially at a time like ours, which has definitely more challenges than others, especially in this area of intimacy and love and relationships. It becomes even more elusive, more difficult. So though I can hardly say that I can be exhaustive in one evening, what I'll try to do, as I promised, is to have a blunt discussion on this topic. When I say blunt, I don't mean necessarily sacrilegious or inappropriate, but blunt as in talking about things about looking at ourselves maybe in new ways, in ways that are sometimes not so comfortable. So in that context, I want to begin. The reason I chose to discuss this week was because this week's chapter actually talks about the first shidduch in the making. We have already Adam and Eve, of course, are the first couple in the Torah. And then you have other couples that are mentioned, including Abraham and Sarah. But in this chapter, you have the first courtship, so to speak, the first dating process, where after Sarah dies, the wife of Abraham, so Abraham, as a dutiful father, goes sends a servant to go find the appropriate shidduch, appropriate match, soulmate for his son Isaac. And he sends Eliezer to back to his homeland, back to the home of Abraham, where Abraham originated from, which is something like southeastern Iraq today. That's more or less the area where Abraham began, in Ur Kasdim, which is before he took his trip northwest to Israel. And the story continues in this chapter in detail. Eliezer negotiates and explores and discovers Rivka, who would become the appropriate shidduch. And then Rivka comes back with him, and when they first meet, Isaac and Rebekah, there's a certain, only one or two verses, well, few verses actually, that are, if you read them on the surface, seem a little cryptic. But if you read them a little deeper, you find many secrets to the secret of a relationship that are as relevant today as it was then, and quite contemporary as well. So to really address this, as I said, this is the reason I chose to talk about it this week, because what better model do we have than the first model that the Torah itself gives? And if that model can be analyzed, we have for ourselves a model, a blueprint for our own lives. Not necessarily the first place most people would look to go back to the Bible over 3,000 years ago. As you could say, different times and different geography and different standards and different cultures. How can we learn from that about how to find your soulmate today in the 21st century, New York City or wherever a person finds himself? But as you'll see, the key thing to realize that the Torah is not a timely book. It's a timeless one. Anything timeless is also timely in the sense, I said timely because, the New York Times of yesterday or 2 days ago is almost worthless next day. But there are wisdoms and knowledge that is timeless and timely at the same time, meaning that any given time in your life or in history, you could find personal relevance, which has always been the ongoing theme of this class in the first place, which is that find the relevant message to our particular lives. So I thought it's appropriate to really look into this story, this episode, and see what we can glean from it. So I remember giving the course in New York here on the Learning Annex. It was on relationships. I think they titled it Love Forever After. So I had no idea who I'm going to be speaking with them when we met. I saw it was like a group around 50 people, men and women. Mostly, I would say many Jews. Everyone was secular. And I decided just to turn it into a discussion more than to just a monologue. I asked the following question. And the question was, how many of you believe in love forever after? That's a concept. Love forever after. Should we do it here too? Why not? I raise them hand. How many of you sincerely believe in love forever after? And don't be ashamed if you don't raise your hands. Okay. I don't know if that's a scientific study, because what does it say if you don't believe in it? And I don't want to be judged, but there in that room, I must say, 49 out of 50 people did not raise their hand. Only one woman raised their hand. I think she was the youngest in the group, and everyone else chuckled, so to speak, when she did. And when I asked them, so why don't you? So one guy got up and said, very simple. He put it. He was going to say. He said actually, he took out of my mouth what I was going to say, so I didn't have to repeat it. He said, "Look, everything in this life, this earth, erodes. Everything is mortal. The food we eat, the money we make, our age, our looks, our skin, everything about us ages. And the same thing is in the general universe. Everything is constant flux. We live in a transient world. So why, suddenly, out of the blue, one thing in life should be forever, called love?" That's the way he put it. I mean, I embellished a little for emphasis. So I said, so what do you think about this woman that raised her hands? He says she probably wasn't in any serious relationship yet. That's the way he put it. So she hasn't been disappointed. In other words, basically, they've all acknowledged that there was a time they did believe in it, and then they lost the faith due to their personal experiences. And The way he put it is actually a very good argument. That I'm not going to ask you all that raise your hands on how you can believe in it when everything around you is constantly changing. So why suddenly was love he's something that doesn't change? Let's be more specific. You fall in love with someone. You hear this all the time. I fell in love. Love at first sight. You see people who, and they are sincere about it. 2, 3 years later, they may not even know each other. 2, 3 years later, they may be in a bitter war. And you have to wonder, was there really love when they first fell in love with each other? Or was it something else? Maybe they just called it love. And what is love if it is 2 or 3 years later, not only there's no love, there's no interest, there's no care, there's even hate. So that's one question. What is love? On a practical level, people change. Everyone agrees with that. So as we change, and two people know each other and they care about each other, their interests change. So one day you may wake up and realize that the person that you cared about or you respected, there are other people now at work or at other places you meet that are more stimulating. Your interests change. You may have gotten bored. Maybe as a novelty, that person was for you. So why is it so inconceivable to think in terms that love is not forever? It's nice to believe it. I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate, obviously, so please don't leave before I finish my middle. You go away saying that I made a good case for no love forever after. But I'm making the case for very obvious reasons, because if we're going to talk about it, as I said, candidly, you have to address it head on. So why is it so inconceivable? And you may fall in love with a book. You like the book, you love this book. You may even return to it over the years, but you're not going to only have one book in your life if you're a reader. You read other books. And same thing with music, and same thing with travel. So even if, of course, you could add into this equation that person something that becomes common, you start losing the excitement, the passion. How could there still be passion of something that you're so familiar with? In the words of the Torah, there's an expression, tainuk tmidi ene tainuk. Any constant pleasure ceases to be pleasurable. Pleasure, by definition, has a certain novelty to it. And then, as I said, as our interests change and as we age and we mature, or immature, whatever you want to call it, but as we change, why is it inconceivable that two people who are changing, the two people who love each other, as they change, they grow out of each other and now have different interests and therefore different friends and perhaps are interested now in someone else? This is not my argument, obviously, but it's a common argument, and it's also a logical one, especially considering everything I said before, which was that everything in this world goes through changes. So to truly answer the question, which is what I did there at the Learning Annex, we have to really look at what the word love is. I just want to add one thing. The fact that many of us believe in it, love forever after, you can also, from the devil's advocate perspective, even though Jews don't believe in the devil, so let's put it from the ulterior argument, would be that people want to believe it. It sounds romantic. It sounds idealistic. It sounds beautiful. You may even have had someone in your life that was that way. So then definitely reinforces that it's not a fantasy, that's truly possible. I don't know how many have had, by raise of hands, how many of you saw a couple that you saw as love forever after? How many here? The same hands that raised by both of them? Maybe that's it. Maybe that's you got the science behind it. So one second, so this is half the room and this half the room, that's how it's split up here? Was this in touch? Um, so, 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 So enough with the devil's advocate part. Let's go deeper into this topic. That will dissect it even further. What is it we look for in a partner? So of course everyone has their own tastes, but in general terms, you could break it down into 3 types of compatibility, as they say. Well, I remember once it was a Shabbos poem, singles workshop. After all the discussion, someone got up and asked, how much, what about the clickability factor? You heard the clickability thing? So that's like, in addition to the compatibility, the clickability. So you could break down the compatibility of people into three obvious dimensions. One is physical compatibility. So two people physically attracted to each other. The fact that some people are attracted to someone else is not attracted to that person. So it's clearly not so objective. Yes, are there certain features that humans have, they call beauties, and some people, so on, that many people are attracted? That's absolutely true. But still, no such person that everyone's attracted to, or vice versa. Everyone has their somewhat of a subjective thing, but it is definitely a compatibility necessity. It's hard to imagine, if you're a healthy person, that you're going to want to continue seeing someone that you're repulsed by their looks, or by their physical appearance, or their vibe that they give off, or whatever it may be. So there's a physical attraction. You could throw into that sexual attraction, other elements, but it comes down to some type of physical manifestation. It's a look, it's body language, it's a way of demeanor, etc., etc. Then there's a second category, dimension, we can call emotional compatibility. You can be absolutely attracted to someone physically, but emotionally there's absolutely no click, no connection. This happens very often. Other people look beautiful on paper or even in real life, and you talk to them, you don't feel anything. It's true that some people, if it's a physical attraction, they begin to feel things, but it's not necessarily the case. So that's the second, emotional compatibility. And then there's a third dimension, which is intellectual compatibility, which means, in addition to the physical and the emotional, or not necessarily addition, but another element, is two people who respect each other's intelligence, stimulated by each other, sharing ideas, arguing even, in a good, healthy way. There's a stimulation. So you could have the first two, but not have the third. You can have emotional connection, but not necessarily be stimulated by the other person, or even respect their intelligence. Now, most people would say, if I had one out of these three, I'd be in good shape. 2 out of the 3 is almost perfect. 3 out of the 3 is absolute. What else can you expect? The fact of the matter is, as we'll see in a few moments, that's not the case at all. Not to dismiss or diminish the need for the first 3, or some of them. There's no question, even from the most spiritual Torah point of view, you find the expression that Rachel or Rebecca or Sarah were Yifas Toya, Yifas Mara. They were physically beautiful or spiritually beautiful, but they definitely gave off a certain beauty. It wasn't just purely souls connected. So the Torah does not see beauty in any way, in any negative sense of the word. So physical beauty and emotional connection, intellectual compatibility are all, no question, critical components in a relationship. But they're not the forces that will create an eternal relationship. And here's what I submit, why most people, and that's what I told them, and I say it here as well, most people would say, or anyone would say, you don't believe in love forever after, is because it's very true. Anything man-made cannot last forever. But let's say you had another dimension that's not man-made. And that's where there's a possibility for eternity. So if you talk about these 3, physical, emotional, and intellectual, these are subjective human connections. As I said, I'm not dismissing that. They're critical, because we're humans after all. But they are all changeable. Physical compatibility. Let's talk about the physical. So 2 people, let's say both handsome couple you met. 30, 40 years down the line, forget about 30, 40 years, even less than that. Age will begin to show on them. Though we hate this word, but there's a thing called wrinkles. So as much as you've tried to, and you can today with all kinds of methods, eliminate them, but there's some things you can't eliminate. And age, one way or other, will wear down a body. Whether it's physically apparent, whether it's apparent to others, only to you. And there's also, of course, the organs, internal ones, and there's the muscles, and there's the nerves, the things not everything you can control, and definitely not forever. So if 2 people who are attracted to each other physically, it's very logical to say they may lose that attraction, which is what you hear so often especially from women, that, what does he need to have a 45-year-old woman? So he went off and ran off with his 20-year-old secretary, her husband, that is. Or had to find himself someone young. And if the man is honest, he may even admit it. He'd say, yeah, it's true. Obviously, he'll find some other reasons to make it not so superficial. but, and plenty of probably knowing his wife for years, he probably have a whole list of things why he wasn't compatible, blah, blah, blah. But the fact of the matter is, physical attraction is definitely subject to the changes and the vicissitudes of life. Simple as that. The same with emotional, the same with intellectual. Emotional, the same is true. You can be emotionally attached to someone, and then you could get bored with them as well. And you meet someone else who emotionally excites you in a different way. This is possible, not only possible, it's common, and it's even logical. It should that why would it not happen? Because we are, as I said, changing human beings. And the same thing with intellectual. Even if two people can really communicate well and understand each other well, and really enjoy the same books and enjoy, or share ideas, etc., that doesn't necessarily mean that things won't change. You may meet another person. There's different levels of intellectual stimulation, and so on. So if you allow a relationship to be controlled by these factors, it is impossible, I would say, that it should not have not to go through changes. What you do about those changes is another thing. That doesn't mean that everything that changes, people divorce or will separate ways and lose love just because things change. People stay together for many reasons. One of them, the big one, is called the big C. It's called the convenience. Or as they say, the unknown evil is worse than the known evil. I know hundreds of people who told me that why they remain in the relationship. And then there's the big C called the children. So convenience, children, there's a whole bunch of things that keep people together. So if there's a 50% divorce rate today, remember that's technical divorce. How many people are emotionally divorced and just don't do it legally for whatever reason? I always hate this joke, but I have to repeat it because it just fits so well. And it's, it's one of those jokes you don't like to say, but it's like that joke about the 2-year-old guy and the 100-year-old woman who were married for 80 years. They come running to the rabbi. They must get a divorce. You're 102. They said we have a bright future ahead of us, and enough is enough. How many years were you married? 80 years. 80 years, you can't, you're able to deal with it. You could have a few more years. No, immediately. So why'd you wait till now? So they said, we waited for the children to die. This is one of the, as I said, the gallows humor of sad jokes, tragic jokes. As you can see why I was tempted to tell it, so simply my mischievous side, even though at the same time I needed this cringe, I don't really like your joke. So that way I can win on both ends of a good joke and then say it's not mine. I heard it from a bad comedian and so. And it's a method. I did stand-up comedy, by the way, in my life, really. There was the Kabbalah show had in the comedy club in New York. It was a stand-up in New York, one of those places. So Rabbi Sitra Naftali invited me, and he said they had one night they rented, they do these nights. So they have the professional comedians, and then they have, this was rabbis. So he asked me to come. So first I said, you're crazy, I'm gonna come? Humiliate myself like that for 5 minutes. If you don't get any laughter, what do you do then, but then I felt it like a challenge. I called him back, said, you know what? I'll go first. I have no clue what this was about. Trust me, it's not easy. Try it out, you'll see. So you get into this big comedy club and you have like a lineup of comedians, maybe like 30 comedians, and they're just like an assembly line, And most of the rabbis, I must say, were you there? Was there? Mark, you were there, right? That was interesting there, right? Okay, so you can confirm what I'm going to say now, right? So they had these few professionals who were good, and it's like big crowd. I'm talking about 500 people, a big room, and then middle, you get the butterflies in your stomach and all that. Yeah, I also get butterflies, I must tell you. So then I said to myself, like, maybe they run out of time and I can go home, etc., etc. No, but they told me, okay, your time is coming. I was in the lineup, and there's glaring lights. Everybody's sitting there, and that's all you're doing. Is they only came to see you. There's no distractions. You have nothing else going on except you're at this. So I got up there. And also I felt not just it wasn't about getting some laughs. I didn't want to do any cheap humor, and I also didn't want to do meaningless humor. So I wanted to tell something. I was trained to teach something when So how do you do that in 5 minutes with a bunch of jokes? So, under pressure is for me. Under pressure, that's when I thrive. So I had no clue what I was going to say. I didn't even have anything prepared. Then, like 5 minutes, I knew I'm about to get on the hot under the hot lights. So I remember, this is, by the way, this unrelated to the entire discussion, mate. So yeah, just for there at these, I didn't use that one there. There was no discussion to be out. So I got up there. I remember I memorized the last few minutes. I said, my best jokes about religion, about rabbis, and I decided I'm going to tell the story through a bunch of jokes, and with some type of message at the end of it, all through humor. And actually, it came out pretty good. Did you say, Mark? Right? Yeah. Okay. But I never did it again. Now I have this platform. I could sit here for an hour and carry on and throw in some jokes. It works. It doesn't work. But it was an interesting thing, and I was very happy I did it. So, because I was always trained, if you want to thrive, you want to grow, you have to put yourself in challenging situations. In case you're very overconfident in your communication skills, book yourself a night at a comedy club and get up on stage and tell me how it went. So it's not an easy thing to do. Should we put anybody on the spot right now? Probably. How do you own this room? Ask. How did I get to that? Who knows? Back to soulmates. There was that joke, right? The joke about the 102-year-old guy. So the fact is, then we have these 3 types of compatibility. Back on the series of it. The fact is that you have these 3 types of compatibility, and as I said, all of us who would not want to have at least 3 seem to be like a perfect scenario. So it's true that they all go through changes, as I've been discussing. But nevertheless, I mean, what else is there? If you have physical, emotional, intellectual compatibility, what else is he? Okay, so there's that clickability thing I mentioned, whatever that means. Because could be you could have all those 3, and then on paper it works, but it doesn't work. Fine. But those 3 seem to be a pretty good case. If you find someone that has those 3 things, and then if you feel that compatibility, it would seem to be, as I said, almost a perfect match. But there's a 4th thing, and this is the one that we're not taught, and this is the one that we also don't come up with on our own, precisely because it's so important, and it's also, as you'll see, the only basis of eternal love. So I don't know when you raise your hands if this is what you meant, but maybe this is an explanation for what you aspire to. You say you believe in love forever after. A foundation of a building is rarely seen by anybody. Have you ever seen a foundation? Sometimes they do some construction sites, and you don't even know it's a foundation. It's one of these things, looks like a concrete pit with a bunch of wires coming out of it, those pipes, and that becomes the foundation. And nevertheless, at the same time, the foundation of a building, without it, the building cannot stand. I mean, it could technically stand for a while, but it won't have that type of unwavering or eternal support. So what is the foundation of a match? There's a bracha we say, a blessing, that we use, that was used by many tzaddikim, by using the Talmud. And you give a blessing to a couple who just got engaged. Well, one of the expressions used is that it should be a binyan ade ad. Have you heard that expression? Binyan ade ad, which means an eternal edifice. Binyan in Hebrew is an edifice, a structure, a binyan, a building. And ade ad or ade means forever, and here's like really forever after. You say a structure forever after. You actually say ade ad twice. And it's a blessing that's given. So clearly, number 1, it's an important blessing, or else you wouldn't say it. Number 2, it's also something that needs a blessing. It means it doesn't happen automatically. So the question is, this foundation element of a relationship, what is it? Is it based on physical compatibility, emotional, or intellectual? You can hardly say that those can be foundational elements in a relationship, because they're all changing, as I said. How would you like to know that the foundation under your building is shifting? Not very secure. So it's true in places like San Francisco or other geographical locations that are built on faults. So they built today after the San Francisco earthquake, architecture was changed, and they build foundations that have a certain flexibility, and they can move in case there is a tremor, etc., etc. But that's a unique situation. I don't think we want to go ahead and build a relationship based on the possibility of an earthquake happening in your romantic life. Exactly. But generally, a foundation, by definition, means that it has and actually there's a lesson to be learned from that too, I just realized. I'll get to it later. The foundation is something that, by definition, Foundation means that you don't want it to be changing. Now, what is above the foundation, the building itself, that can change. You can add a floor. Or more importantly, even if you have the floors situated, you can furnish them. You can change design. Actually, the beauty of a great home is almost a paradoxical element. That on one hand, there is a foundational element that keeps it secure. On the other hand, they're always changing things. What kind of relationship would there be if there's no dynamic changes? So look at a good, healthy tree. A healthy tree consists of a trunk, which in a way is, I wouldn't say it's the trunk and the roots are the foundation, mostly the roots. And because they have healthy roots, a little poem here, a tree with healthy roots will bear healthy fruits, like that. Precisely because it has deep roots and it has that nurturing and the nourishment that the roots um, gather moisture and water to feed the tree grows and branches out and more, and it's a fruit tree, it's fruits, and every season it repeats itself. So you have here both. It's take away the roots. Someone will say, you know what, all I need is other fruits of the tree and the branches. What do I care about the roots? You chop off the roots, the rest will die as well. That's the paradox, as we shall elaborate soon some more. That's precisely the thing that is unwavering, and a foundation element gives the power to be as flexible and as changing as possible. Take one away, the other one will also be affected. So what is the foundation when we say binyan adaya, the foundational element? The physical, emotional, and intellectual are definitely vital, but they are more on the branch level. Branches, fruits, flowers, the elements or the conscious elements that connect people together. What is the unconscious foundation that ultimately is the key to a soulmate? And I submit as well that those that don't believe in a soulmate is because they are unaware or never experienced an unconscious dimension of relationship. Because if you think is the conscious dimensions between two people that keep them together, that's a big distortion. It's much deeper than that. It's unconscious elements, and you'll soon say they play with each other. They complement each other. So what is the fourth compatibility? Here it is. It's called spiritual compatibility. And this is an unconscious force, but it's not completely unconscious in the sense we cannot identify it. It's unconscious as like a foundation is. Once it's there, it's not that obvious. But without it, everything else falls. And definitely nothing can be eternal without it. So in simple English, what is this fourth compatibility? Is this: do you share a vision with the other person? A vision that transcends the changes, day-to-day changes of life. How do you want to build a home together? What kind of children do you want? When people come into your environment, what kind of feeling you want to give them? What legacy are you leaving? And these are just some of the basic questions that are only possibly answered in the fourth dimension. In the first three, they're pieces of it, perhaps, a glimpse here, a glimpse there, but they don't deal with this key element. So when two people, no matter what changes they go through in life, physical, emotional, intellectual, but visions don't change. Your fundamental personality doesn't change, the essence of it. Your mission statement, so to speak, in life doesn't change. Two people find partnership on that level, then it's just a difference of how they play itself out. When they're 20 years old, it plays out one way. When they're 30, a different way. And when they're 80, a different way. Think of your relationship with yourself. You also go through many changes. But there's certain parts of you that never change. The things that you really, if you ever embrace ultimately your own personal mission in life, your calling, so to speak, a calling does not change. You may discover new dimensions of it. You may discover new ways it manifests. But a fundamental calling, the key talents that you have. A person that is an artist by nature, you don't suddenly become no longer an artist when you turn 50, 60, 70. It may be a way it manifests, a new way it expresses itself. But these things don't change. That's a foundational aspect to who you are. Now, could you discover new talents? Absolutely. Can you discover new dimensions of your foundation? Of course. I would say even more than that. I say most of us don't even know what our foundational personality is about. Because how would you know? How does a person really know what is the unwavering and unchanging element of their own being? It's either a few ways a person comes to it. A healthy home, an environment where you're nurtured, and self-confidence, through self-confidence you come to an environment with people that are secure, so you yourself are secure to discover yourself. Unfortunately, the antithesis to that is, think of an environment that's not secure. Parents that are insecure, that are fighting with each other, that don't know what they're good at, therefore they have to knock everybody else. People in identity crisis. I'm not even getting into more extreme dysfunctionality of abuse and other stuff that completely doesn't allow a person to emerge, a child into an adult. So in an unnurturing environment, very, very difficult to discover a calling, because you're in a danger zone. You're running from a fire, which can be an unhealthy home. It's very difficult to find out who you are. You're busy running. Think if you had to run every day from a fire that's burning, God forbid. No time to think, no time to meditate, no time to ponder about yourself or life and so on. What is a healthy childhood? A healthy childhood, in its most so-called broadest sense of the word, is a child growing up in an environment provided for by healthy parents, where the child does not have to yet be thrown into a world that he or she has to support him or herself, in an environment where you're still protected from the elements, from somewhat of the cruelty of life. So you can develop the tools, the defenses, the skills, that when you do go out into this hostile, cruel world, you have something to work with. What happens if a child's life is aborted, meaning you become an adult too quickly, whether it's due to a divorce, whether it's due to parents that are unhealthy, whether it's due to absenteeism, abuse? I mean, the list goes on. So basically, your growth has been aborted to some extent. I'm not saying this to depress anyone. It's just an analysis that you have to look at. Does that mean all is lost? No, but you have to know that something has to be compensated for. You must find a replacement for that, because if not, you will constantly be looking for that lost childhood, basically, for that love that you should have got. The saddest thing to me is, when I began giving this class years and years ago, eons ago, that's how long it is. I remember I thought I wasn't so naive. Then I discovered I was more naive than I thought, a lot more. I grew up in a home which pretty much, I would say, insulated, in a good way, I mean, and I didn't really see what we call severe, or even not so severe, abuse. And when I began teaching and meeting people that did not grow up in my own home, I began hearing things that at first I thought these exaggerations, not that I underestimated that people can be cruel or difficult or abusive, but when you haven't experienced it firsthand, at first you're almost incredulous when you hear certain things. I remember, and I just repeated because this was the first time that really I was shaken, and I remember that it changed dramatically something inside of me. Yes, in a good way. Understanding sometimes the darkness of life. I don't know if it's good or not, but definitely more realistic. And I remember a guy who came to this class years and years ago. He lives today in Israel. And he was like, I was then at the time, maybe 25, 26, at least 35, 40, came to speak to me privately, personal, privately, one-on-one in my office. And first of all, I felt uncomfortable. He's much older than I am. Much older than I am, and I'm coming to me for advice. But I remember what he shared with me. I just simply was stunned. I don't think I let on, but I could not believe it. He said to me, I have to tell you, I think these were his words, the first word. He says, I learned love from a dog. I first thought that was some joke, or somebody he's trying to spring on me. And he said to me, my father was an alcoholic. I used to come home in these rages and then just violent, attack my mother, and I would often, as the oldest, protect her. And he literally, with a baseball bat, would beat me. And I would run out of the house. Sometimes I wouldn't even go home. And I would sleep in the garden near the kennel. And there's the dog that would soothe me. So I remember when I heard it, I was like, I didn't even know what was coming. I was sitting there and I first I thought to myself, was this like, maybe something matter with him, But then I realized it was absolutely true. I just remember this because this was like for me, it was the first time I heard something so radical. And then that was like for nothing to what I heard later in my life. But I remember the moment because I lost my innocence, I must say, at that moment in a way. I mean, my innocence about what's possible. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And, we became friends and I don't know if I helped him, I guess, just talking about it and I gave him a different perspective. And he says, I truly learned love and I will find a woman that I will love, but not from my father and not from my mother, who was like this enabler and equally unhealthy. I found that the dog helped me discover it. This dog will just keep me nurturing it. So if you don't hear it yourself, you think it's like off the wall, something the matter. I mean, some of you probably this is not surprising to. Some of you may be just as shocked as I was at. The point I'm making here is not so much so relevant to the particular discussion tonight, but it just tells you the extremes of what people can be growing up in homes. And sometimes you need the eclipse of the sun to appreciate sunlight. I learned from people like that, and I've shared this with people like that. Not that God forbid that they should have to be the teachers. I wish they didn't have to go through this. It's, I think, maybe the most horrible thing in life to see, tragic thing to see children whose lives are aborted. When you see the children of the Holocaust, or children in private Holocaust today, personal ones, because children are innocent. They definitely cannot be blamed. I'm not suggesting that an adult deserves to be hurt. No one deserves to be hurt. But a child it's absolutely, if not a child, then where's our last vestige of hope in purity? So when you see children like that, it's like, it's unbelievable to me. But the contrast, the thing you learn from that is, when you see something deprived, you understand the importance of when you have it. So I count my blessings, obviously, and I obviously ever since appreciated, because health doesn't feel like anything. You grow up in a healthy environment, it doesn't feel like anything. That's why it's healthy. Like if someone asks you, what does health feel like? What does it feel like to be healthy? If you start describing what it feels like, that's a pretty good sign that that's not so good. If you describe it, okay, it feels it feels dull, or it feels sharp, or it feels like it's squeezing you here, or it's pushing you there. That's not good. A pressure here. That's not. When you start feeling things, that means there's something wrong. So when you grow up in a healthy environment, it's a certain taking for granted because it's just smooth flowing, smoother. You don't expect otherwise. But what you learn from that is that that the importance you talk about, I said about love before. These are foundational. I'm going back to why it is so difficult sometimes to discover your own foundational personality. So what happens? You grow older, and being human beings, we all have our talents, we have our skills. You go to school, and you learn about a lot of things. Sometimes you may discover something that you're really good at, even something powerful like being an artist, or I mean, for that matter, actually everybody in some way is an artist. It depends. Some people are artists in business, and some are artists in art. But you learn different skills, and then we're thrown into the world. Our schools don't really necessarily focus on discovering what your soul is like. So you're thrown into the world, and by the time you're already in the world, you have to now make a living. You have to pay bills. You have responsibilities. And then there's, of course, our own sexuality, where most of us are thrown into it long before we're really ready for it, due to whatever the way society works today, peer pressure, and just our own needs and our own hormones, etc. So it's not surprising that we're in a world where we're working on the level of the branches and the fruits and the physical, emotional, intellectual compatibility and the foundational parts, which is the vision that you are about and what you should be sharing with someone, has been neglected. So what do? Now you're smack in the middle of it all. You're an adult. You're already in need of a relationship. You've probably been in one or more than one, some healthy, not so healthy. And what is your foundation? Can you stop your life and go back to your childhood and suddenly say, I'm going to build this thing from scratch? That's not possible. You can't turn the clock back. Our personalities are no longer child personalities. We may have the inner child, as they say, but there's still an element that you've now grown into an adult. And as I said before, even if you had the money, all the money in the world, you don't have to work, and there's no pressures on you, what do you do next? So what do? You are a functioning adult, or not so functioning, whatever you want to call it. Adults, maneuvering, managing, etc., etc. So the first thing is, as the wise sages say, Yediyas hamachla is chetzer refuah. Knowing an illness is half the cure. Even if we are not fully developed, our so-called foundational, visionary, spiritual compatible element in our own souls, Knowing that, and knowing that that's what's needed, is already halfway there. And it's interesting, they say halfway. It's a pretty strong statement. To say knowledge of illness or of knowing your deficiency is half the cure, if you said it was 10%, 20%, but half is a strong statement. It is half. The statement is half. Why? Because it's not because per se half of it is cured, but you have a big head start if you're aware. Because then it's a question of now filling that gap. And I can tell you from my personal experiences, the biggest challenge is creating that awareness. After that, it's almost automatic. The rest it'll heal itself. Creating that awareness to show somebody, to help somebody see in their own lives what is lacking, is far, far harder than to fill that void once they know it. Because if you don't know it, what you're doing is, whether you know it or not, you're consciously and unconsciously creating all kinds of you're contributing to the illness perpetuating itself. And that's not because we're malicious or we're self-destructive. It's just the nature of the beast. You become your own worst enemy. And this is not intentional. If it's intentional, it's another, you call it something else. There's a name for it in psychology. It's unintentional means that you go about your life, you think everything is going fine, but there's a void inside of you that you're not identified yet, and it's causing you to make decisions all the time. Because voids make decisions. There's no question about it. When there's a hunger, it's going to express itself somewhere. So if you know you're hungry and you know what you're hungry for, that's why it's half the cure. Because now the question is, I know what it is, now I have to go find it. So I've seen people waste half their lives away, as Leonard Cohen sings, looking for a miracle or looking for something, but they don't even know what it is that they're really hungry for. So discussing, just purely discussing this fourth level of compatibility that I'm describing tonight, spiritual compatibility, the more you know about it, even if you don't have access to it immediately, that is the key to opening up the door to finding it. Now remember, another trap of this, especially when it comes to emotional relationships, or relationships which are emotional, I should say, is that we don't have patience. We don't have patience. You want something fixed now. Now, sometimes God blesses you and you can do it that way, but sometimes it's what's called the long, short road. There's a short, long road and there's a long, short road. You know the difference? Sounds the same, right? Well, there's a story in the Talmud that goes like this. A guy was traveling on a road, and he came to a fork in the road. He was on the way to Jerusalem. So one of the Jerusalem kids, who were known for their wit, he asked the kid, so which way to Jerusalem? So if it was Yogi Berra, he'd say, you come to the fork in the road, take it. But that's not the Talmud answer. The Talmud says, so the little kid says to the traveler, he says, well, this is the long, short road, and this is the short, long road. And he scampers off. So the traveler is left with this riddle. What's the long, short? Sound to him, short, long sounds shorter than long, short. Okay, so he takes the short, long road. And he sees Jerusalem right up ahead. Yeah, right there, he sees it. Beautiful city. Problem is that he encounters all this, what do you call it, overgrowth or undergrowth, whatever. There's thorns and trees, and it was impossible to make through. All day he spends hours. He sees Jerusalem, but he can't get through because the road is all overgrown with thorns and all the branches and so on. So he goes back and takes the second road, which is called the long, short road. And this road, he doesn't see Jerusalem, not 1 mile, not 2 miles. It's a much longer road, but there's nothing blocking him. It's a long road, and he finally reaches the city. So one was just maybe a few yards away or a few miles away, and this other was many more, but this was long, short, this was short, long. Now in life, there are problems that can be resolved in the short, long way. Well, let's put this in a short way, short-term solutions they call, which is symptomatic based. You have a cut, you put on a Band-Aid. You have a headache, you take a painkiller. But then there are long-term problems. And long-term problems can never be solved with short-term solution. You can buy time. You can subside the pain. You can, but you're never going to solve a long-term problem with a short-term solution. It's just unscientific. It doesn't work that way. So if you can resolve something short-term, great. That means maybe it was only a short-term problem and there had nothing deeper going on. But if, God forbid, a pain continues in your life, and short-term solutions don't, that's a sign there's something deeper going on. You cannot rely on the short term. But our tendency, even then, we still want the short, long road. We want the short road. We don't want the long one. So when it comes to relationships, as I said, there's a lot to do with, I would say, our attitude. I think if a person's attitude becomes healthier, so God usually provides more. Like I said earlier, you may be sitting near your soulmate right now. Don't look around. That's not what I meant, and you may not know it because you have your own things to work through. And sometimes when we say mazel, mazel, good luck or something like that, mazel also needs to have something to rest upon. If you're looking for a job and you stay in your basement and you don't go out to network or meet people or advertise yourself, the mazel may be in the street, but you're not going for it. So mazel also requires some type of effort. So the effort that is necessary is, as I said, number one is to identify this dimension. The physical, emotional, intellectual compatibility, you don't need me to help you with. Everybody has got their interests. But if you want to really look for that final element, final fourth dimension, called the soul dimension, and by soul I do not mean per se religion or how many mitzvahs a person does. As a matter of fact, I remember that someone came to discuss, I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago, and they were dating, one person was dating, I think I mentioned last week, actually, two people were dating each other, they were both here, and the woman told me, she doesn't think the guy is religious enough. Doesn't keep Shabbos yet, she does keep Shabbos, eat kosher and so on. And I told her, what I was taught was that when it comes to shidduchim, when it comes to relationships, there's no two people that are exactly in the same place. That's impossible. Even we are never in the same place from one day to the next, let alone two people. What you're looking for is that two people are going in the same direction. So you may be here, I told this woman, as far as observing goes, and he may be here. The key thing is that you shouldn't be going like that. So you may be very frum or religious right now, but you're going this way. And he may be very not, but he's going this way. That's the key. And this is not just about observance, it's about almost all issues, because some people, it's just a question of really the journey that we're on. You look for a partner that is on a journey with you, not a partner who is in the same spot as you are. Usually those of us that look for someone that's exactly like ourselves, and I have to say, whether you like it or not, it's a sign of insecurity. You need someone exactly like where you are. What does that mean? Maybe that person has something to teach you too. Maybe you should be exactly where they are. But that wouldn't be healthy either. You have to be where you are. And then you find that the other person is going in the direction, or more or less in the direction, and you both can teach each other, and you both have the humility to journey together. That's what it is. It's about a journey. So to go back to this, key is to identify this fourth dimension. And when you do, and when you understand what it means, you'll understand what a soulmate means. So what is a soulmate in this context? The word soul is the hard word to understand. What is soulmate? There's a body mate, there's a soulmate. What's a soulmate? So the way I would define a soul is, remember that if you have no relationship with your own soul, is it possible for you to discover your soulmate? So one person once answered me when I asked this question, they said, yeah, I haven't found my soul, but if I find someone else who doesn't touch with their soul, they'll help me find my soul. That's a big mistake. No one's going to help you find your soul. Maybe a teacher or a mentor or a book or a song, but a partner in life. And this is one of the big problems. People are looking for that, to fill that void of what your soul should be experiencing through another person, which already creates a whole imbalance. Like, who's in charge here? Soulmates, by definition, mean that there are two souls. Each have a very unique personality. They don't have to be completely in touch with themselves, but somewhat. And now they begin this adventure called life, called a relationship, where two souls are interacting, and maybe they're helping each other discover what a soul means. So yes, if you were looking for someone who, if two people find and they both are interested in this soul journey, then you're talking about the beginnings of a relationship that's on a soul level. If it's about the other three compatibilities, they're all very nice, but they're not about souls, and they're not about the foundation elements. Now you could say, well, we grew up in a society where the focus is on externals. Beauty matters a lot, class, money, of course, emotional, intellectual abilities, and so on. Relationships, or some people call sexual prowess and knowledge and experience. This is a society that has created a standard, whether we like it or not. Many will say, this is what I grew up with. Maybe we're programmed. Well, I can tell you, if you want to continue your life and say, I'm a victim to what society has provided for me, then you're going to get what society offers you. And that is, the statistics show, you'll not find a long-term relationship. If you want to discover soul, you're going to have to somewhat break the social programming of our society. There's no real two ways around that. And people don't like to hear this, but you want to be blunt, that's what it comes down to. This doesn't mean that you have to become a hermit and lose your social aesthetics and be disconnected from the life of a, we'll call it a sensual world. On the contrary, it just means you can't be trapped by it. You can't be a slave to it. There's no question, in Judaism, this isn't about, a relationship is not just about some type of spiritual experience at the expense of. Some people have that attitude at the expense. I don't care what the physical is like, I don't care everything else, it doesn't even matter if I can talk to my spouse. That's not true at all. And here's the distortion comes from at the end of Eshes Chayil, when we sing it or say it Friday night, which itself is a very powerful prayer, and it's actually from Proverbs, Mishlei. So one of the last lines is Sheker Achein v'Hevel Hayofi. The expression is that Sheker, false is grace, and Hevel Yefi, and empty is beauty. And then it continues, Ki'im, the true thing we honor, the true thing we are, we praise, is a woman of valor, a woman of who has awe of God. Now, everybody, when you read it literally, it says, it's a dismissal of Chen and of Yefi, of beauty and of grace, which in itself is somewhat of a contradiction. I mentioned earlier, the Torah is full of people. It says, Noach motza chen be'enei Hashem. Noach found chen in the eyes of God. Throughout the Torah, you say the person, Yosef, had chen. He had grace. It's not at all a dismissed concept. That throughout the entire Torah, chen is one of the most beautiful virtues. A person who has charm. A person who's charismatic. And the same thing with Yefi, beauty. Torah does not dismiss beauty. Everywhere you find, I said before, Yefas Teir, Yefas Mara, Moses, the different people the Torah described that had a beautiful face or a beautiful, and this is not just talking about spiritual beauty, it's talking about physical beauty. As a matter of fact, there's a law in the Torah that when you build a synagogue, you write a Torah scroll, you write a mezuzah, it should be done on beautiful parchment with beautiful handwriting. Literally, not just again spiritually. You could say, who cares? A mezuzah, the main thing is its spiritual value. The main thing is that the letter should be written right. It's Torah. But it says, Zeh Keli Vanvehu, the Torah is a verse that says that this is God and you shall you shall beautify him. So the Talmud learns, from this we learn that when you do a mitzvah, it should be done with physical beauty too. The environment should be beautiful. The temple that was built on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem was a beautiful structure. Physically, architecturally. So aesthetics and physical beauty in this world, from a Torah point of view, is actually a reflection of spiritual beauty. So what is this verse saying? That it's sheker and hevel, that it's false and empty. So the answer is also obvious, but I'll explain it. It's saying, if it's only that, if the only thing you have is charm and beauty, and there's nothing behind it, then you can also create it is false. It is false. Picasso said that art is the greatest lie that reveals a deeper truth. This is an artist speaking. What is he saying? That when you look at art per se, what is art? Art doesn't depict reality. Nothing in this world is static. A piece of art is static. It depicts us as a state of being that's not static. A face, a horizon, a flower, abstraction, whatever. It elicits movement, but it itself physically is a static object hanging on the wall. Because on its own, if you think of it on its own, like that story, what does the joke go? that this woman was pushing her carriage with a newborn baby. And a guy comes over and looks at the baby. What a beautiful baby! And the mother says, with such nachas, with such pride, she kvelds, as they say. She says, "Oh, you should see the picture." You know? I wonder what kind of child that grew up from that, you know? She's talking about a real life child. She says, "That's nothing. You should see the picture that was taken of the child, that is." So, yes, if beauty becomes solely driven by the physical external, then it is empty and false. So it's about a body and a soul. In Jewish thought, the key is to have, and this is also relevant to relationship, is a person who is beautiful inside and outside. Is it true that we can be seduced by the outside? Yes, we live in a world that is superficial, that seduces our senses all the time. So that's why we're also trained, we also have a soul within. And just like you don't want to just be seen as a person that's purely superficial by your externals, you have an inside and a personality, you would assume that other people want to be respected the same way. So we live in a world where we are trapped in that world. You know, some say men are trapped by it more than women. To be debated or not, but there's that so-called theory. But regardless, that's what the verse is saying. So you talk about this fourth level of compatibility. Until you don't discuss that, I must say, you may find your soulmate anyway, because God can be nice and compassionate. But let's put it this way, it's not necessarily due to your efforts. If you're trying to find a shidduch and finding it difficult, or you're looking to do something new, my advice, simple advice, but it's not so simple, is you have to think differently. You know, Apple computers came up with think different, but the fact of the matter is, it's comes long before modern culture. As I like to put it, when people ask me, they want to change their lives, I always say, so, you know, if you think what you thought, and you say what you said, and you do what you did, what do you think you're going to have? What's the result? You're going to have what you had. And say, yeah, that's right, that's true. Now that explains everything. But the fact of the matter is, we all want to have something different, but we think the way we thought yesterday, and we do what we did yesterday, and we speak what we spoke yesterday. So exactly, where exactly is this new result going to come from? Some outside mysterious force is suddenly going to bring to you a new development? If you're thinking in the box that you were trained to think, and the other and speaking and doing the same, where's change going to come from? In the healing world, they call it, if nothing changes, nothing changes. Meaning, if you do nothing to change, nothing's going to change. Action and reaction. So to define a little deeper the spiritual dimension, and this I go back now to the chapter where Rebecca meets Isaac. So there's one verse, it's a very powerful verse. So it says that when Rebecca and Isaac saw each other, so there's a story where Rebecca covers her face, which is why we cover the Badekin by a chuppah. It originates from this chapter. But then there's another verse that goes like this. Literally, that they both go into the tent of Sarah. So Rashi explains, I'm reading from the verse here, at the end of the chapter. That when Rebecca entered the tent of Sarah, Isaac saw with his own eyes that she was just like his mother. Rebecca was just like his mother Sarah. The way he used the expression, "V'hi Sarah imay." She was like Sarah. It was like no difference. He saw his mother. Now I know that's not necessarily a virtue these days. You know, most people do not want to find their mother in their spouses, or their father for that matter. But in those good old days, especially when you have a mother like Sarah, it wasn't such a bad thing. And then Rashi continues, what did he see? It's not just a abstract statement. He saw three virtues that he saw in his mother's life. Literally, the way Rashi puts it is, he saw a flame, a ner dalek me'erev Shabbos la'erev Shabbos. He saw a flame that would burn from one Friday to the next. The second thing he saw was bracha mitzvah be'isa, a blessing in her yeast, to put it in her dough, which means technically means that she knew how to bake challah well. And the third thing, or she was a good cook. And the third thing was that he saw a cloud, an aura, around her, surrounding or connected to the tent, to that tent. And those three things is what he had experienced his whole life as a son of Sarah. So what are these three things? Okay. And even though the Torah speaks about what Isaac saw in Rebekah, the fact of the matter goes both ways, because both of them have souls, obviously. So in a soulmate, these three dimensions exist also not just on the feminine, but also in the male counterpart. So some of the commentaries explain these are the three mitzvahs that every Jewish family, from that time on, the three foundations of every home. One is Shabbos, the lighting of the candle from Friday to Friday is symbolic of Shabbos. The second is kosher, symbolized by the dough, and the third is taras mishpach, family purity, essentially a sanctity to sexuality, concept of the mikveh and the purity that goes around sexuality. So in a sense, it's like the three mitzvahs that are the foundation of a home. And both of them are not just, even though the woman may be the one that initiates it, but it's really a relationship issue for both husband and wife and the way they build a family. But on a deeper psychological level, I want to share with you what these three are and what they mean in most relevant terms to us here in our time today. Because they're much broader than just the three mitzvahs. The three mitzvahs themselves have deeper meaning. What are these three things? So Shabbos, or in this case the flame, the candle. The candle is always symbolic. Whenever you see the word flame in the Torah, it always means soul. Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam. It's an expression. The soul of the human being is a flame of God. Why? Why do we light candles before Shabbos? So there are different technical reasons, halachic reasons, historical reasons given. But the primary reason that's given, same reason we light Hanukkah candles, and the same reason we light a flame in the temple, and even, God forbid, we light a flame for a yahrzeit candle and stuff like that. You know why we light a flame? A flame is a gift given to us by God. It is the closest physical symbol of what a soul looks like. So you want to look for a soulmate? Here's what you should look for. Look for a flame. This is what a flame looks like. Look at a flame, what do you see? Number one, most obvious thing of all. It's the only physical object that you can see with your eyes that defies gravity. Helium and some gases also defy gravity, but you have to blow them in a balloon for you to see it with your eye. Flame is the only physical object. Everything else falls. A flame rises. So the first quality of a soul is that it defies gravity. So the women out here, look for a guy that defies gravity. And the men, look for a woman that defies gravity. What does that mean? That someone that is not drawn by the tug of this earth. Someone that is not drawn and controlled by materialism, basically. Now, that doesn't mean that a person doesn't have any materialism. That's pretty rare, and I don't think you're going to find that, and I don't even know if that's the person you want. You know, like they say, you go to, you want hell for the company and heaven for the climate. So you also need a person that has some feet on the ground as well, but they know how to defy gravity, meaning they're not trapped by earth. In more, let's put it more spiritual terms, it means someone that's transcendent. A transcendent human being, they're looking for transcendence. Now, every human being on earth needs some form of transcendence, but some of us have given up, and some of us have simply been trapped by the gravitational pull of the marketplace, of competition, of trying to prove ourselves, etc., etc. So that's number one feature of a flame. Another feature of a flame is that it's constantly flickering. It's never static. It moves. It's mobile. Not stuck. You want to find a partner in life, you want someone, you may not know what the future brings, but you want someone that's not stuck. That new challenges come up. This person can be your partner in looking at the challenges and let's find out new ways to solve them. Someone that's too stuck in their ways, very difficult to have a relationship with. Obviously, this also means that you can't be that way as well. You know, like one person says, what's wrong? At least he's not stuck in his ways. I could be stuck. He's not stuck, so we have flexibility going on. Very nice. What happens one day he wakes up and says the same, you know. So the point is, second thing with the flame is the flickering element. Finally, a flame does two more things. It gives off light and it warms. It gives off light, it illuminates. There are people who know how to suck energy from others, and there are other people who know how to illuminate others. I remember the first time I went to an office meeting. I hated meetings then, I still don't like them. But then at least someone gave me a formula, what is a successful meeting. I remember I could finish the meeting, it was like a 2-hour marathon, 3-hour marathon, whatever. There have been longer marathons, I know. And the guy told me, listen, I see you're new to this. I'll give you the lesson that I was taught. A meeting will either drain you or empower you. There's no such thing as in between. After that, as soon as you know how you feel at the end of the meeting, you'll know whether it was a good meeting or not. If it drains you, it was not a good meeting. If it empowers you, it's a good meeting. Same thing, I guess, is with people. There's some people that drain you and some people that empower you. I'm sure there's something in between. But this is what I always suggest when you're looking for change in your life. Maybe one place to begin is the most obvious, is what they call your Rolodex. Even though there are no Rolodexes today. Does anybody remember what a Rolodex looked like? Very good. It's a certain, you come from a certain circa period, a certain stage. Well, the Rolodexes. Today, what are they called? Where do people hold these things? These are address books, Blackberries, Palm Pilots. I think Palm Pilot is also somewhat so you look at your Rolodex and then ask yourself like this. Look at your address book, your contact list, contact manager. And you look at it and you say, okay, how many of these people, if I am enthusiastic about something, and you put a phone call into them, they'll make sure to remind you that you shouldn't be too enthusiastic. They'll give you all the reasons that you shouldn't be so happy, you shouldn't be so hopeful, etc. Your misery likes company. And then how many people you know if you call them, you'll always feel better after you hang up. So if you look at this list, it may be good to, maybe you don't want to go cold turkey and eliminate all the, you may end up with no friends, or so-called friends. But it doesn't hurt to maybe every few months to do a little called a defragmentation, as they call it, and so-called, maybe fill some of your day with some friends that do leave you that way, upbeat. And then maybe you just won't have time for others. That's also an option. So it doesn't have to be done so maliciously. It could be just done by, I got busy. There was a woman that recently got married. Thank God I was at her wedding. I promised her that the day she gets married, I have my dancing shoes, I'll be there. I don't know if that was an incentive or not, but at least I fulfilled my side of it. But I remember, I have to tell you, when she got engaged, I'm not going to tell you what neighborhood she lived in. You may be able to guess. Literally, there were friends of hers that couldn't stand it. And I remember they were trying to convince her that this is not the right thing. She's very happily married, thank God. Now, I was wondering why. I think the reason is obvious. It's not so comfortable, because once you get into that clique of single life, you want to, you have your thing, this is the club. And when someone starts breaking away from that club, from the Lonely Hearts Club, it can be somewhat demoralizing. So don't get caught in that trap either way. Okay, for those that had to hear that, fine. Those that didn't know what I'm talking about is also fine. So to go back to the flame, giving off light. A black hole is very powerful, but it sucks light. It doesn't give it off. It doesn't illuminate. Now, this doesn't mean you have to always be an illuminator, but it means a person is capable of giving light, and is comfortable doing so, and it doesn't feel that it's an imposition to inspire or illuminate another. And then finally, warming, which is just another side of that, warming another. So this little flame that we light on Fridays, and other times in the year, but especially Fridays, and lit by women actually, is itself, if you study it, it's an unbelievable lesson in life right there. 4 things, and there are many other things in the flame. I'm not going through everything right now. So there's the first thing that Isaac saw in Sarah, in Rebecca, which was similar to Sarah. He saw that all week long this flame burned. Whether it actually burned physically or not, it's discussed in commentaries. But she was a flame. She didn't just light flame, she was a flame. I remember, was it Maria? Someone, I worked in my office, so she wrote a little story. I think we have it on the website, a beautiful story. Where there was a little girl at a birthday party. So they prepared a cake for her with the candles. And they said, now's the time to blow it out. Whatever, 6 candles. She was 6 years old, 7 candles. And this was friends, they all meant well. So she said, I was taught that by Jews we don't blow out candles, we light candles. Which was a very profound thing to say, because blowing out a candle actually is seen as blowing out a flame, it's blowing out a soul. You actually don't blow out candles, there's a custom not to blow them out. Now I'm not here to dismiss to in any way knock the custom that people, the age-old, eternal custom to blow out candles at your birthday cake. Just telling you a story with a little girl. So lighting flames is a critical component, because when you build a home and a family, and you want to find a soulmate, you are really lighting a flame with that person. Two flames come together. That's what souls are about, which is the final fifth thing I want to talk about a flame, and that flames don't repel each other, they connect with each other. When two flames get closer, what happens? They melt into one, where you can't even distinguish between the one and the other. Everything else is not that way. The only thing, water is also that way, has that same similarity, but everything else doesn't work that way. Usually there's either repulsion, or at least not complete fusion. So that's the flame. The next thing is the bracha mutzia be'isa, which in a broader sense is not just eating kosher, it's the sensitivity, how you consume the world around you. What do you think really is the story behind kosher anyway? Besides the mysteries that we may never understand exactly what makes something kosher or not kosher, but above all, it's spiritual sensitivity. Who gave you a right to eat anything in this earth? What right do you have to consume something that's not yourself? Even yourself you can. I remember at this class years ago, it was up 79th Street, not 79th, 71st Street. This is a story that happened. I don't know if some of you maybe remember it. And there was a guy came to the class, and he was I remember as soon as he walked in, he was this aggressive energy. And it was like, so I guess I opened up, anybody has any questions. So he says, yeah, I have. I was at a table, Shabbos table, and I saw those Jews, those religious Jews, what do you call it? What do you call when you consuming meat, but say it in a really derogatory fashion? Gorging. Devouring. Okay, yeah, very good. You guys got the synonyms are very good. Devouring, what did you say? Gorging? Devouring, yes.
Stuffing.
Yeah, one of those. I think devouring is the best one, yeah. Okay. And he's saying, what right do you have to kill animals, to eat and consume? But he was like this whole anger and all that. So I don't know what came to me, but I said to him, I said, what do you think about a vegetarian that beats his wife? So, little did I know, this was complete instinct, I don't know where it came from, little did I know that this guy was both. Because he went ballistic. Like he turned to his friend, he says, how does he know that? I mean, he didn't say those words, but I saw, afterwards I heard about it. Now my point was very simple. He's very sensitive to animals. And I'm not suggesting one shouldn't be, and I'll address that in a moment. But he just shows where he's sensitive. Everything else, human beings, he can mistreat. So where's the spiritual sensitivity? Why is it selective? And I will say that the Torah's answer for this is we have no right to consume anything on earth. Not an animal, not a vegetable, not a mineral, which is what I explained in that class. I said, let me ask you, what gave you a right to tear off an apple from a tree? Or for that matter, eat salt, or anything, mineral or vegetable. Why? Because there's no so-called blood shed. You don't see the animals expiring. Maybe a vegetable lives in its own world and knows how to communicate with its fellow vegetables, and you don't understand. What right? Oh, the right is because if you don't eat vegetables and minerals, you'll be dead. So where exactly do you draw the line? One of the Rebbes once was walking as a little child with his father in the woods. And when they went by a tree, this young boy, who later would become a Rebbe, tore off a leaf from the tree and rubbed it with his fingers. So afterwards, his father rebuked him and said to him, what right did you have to tear off a leaf from a tree and rub it just for no reason? This Rebbe, as he grew up, he wrote about how the impact it had on him, the sensitivity. So this is a leaf of a tree. We're not talking about a leaf. How many things do we do? Or one of the expressions used as a metaphorical, that when a wicked person walks on the street, the cobblestones cry out,
What right do you have to walk on me? I never defied God's will. You're walking on me? So from a Torah point of view, sensitivity to the environment and to the world around us, not just animal, mineral, vegetable as well, and of course other people, is universal because everything is sacred. Everything has a divine spark in it, and you cannot touch it unless you're given permission. From Torah perspective, the only reason we have a right to consume anything is because not only were we given permission, we were given a responsibility to elevate it. So if you eat an apple off a tree and you use the strength to help other people, the apple says thank you to you for allowing me to become a partner in changing this world for the better. But if you take that strength and hurt someone, the apple says to you, what right did you have to consume me while I was hanging on the tree? I never hurt anybody. So when you talk about it from that perspective, this is the universe is a field of energy, just made up of different dimensions. The human being is the only one that can alter the course of nature. Everything else goes according to its plan, like a clock, and we can either elevate it or degrade it. Nothing in between. So we talk about the bracha Mitzvah V'isa, what he saw in Rebecca, as he saw in his mother, was that sensitivity to the organic and the material of this universe. In the broadest sense, that's far beyond kosher. It means you can eat kosher but not be kosher. The Baal Shem Tov once showed his Chassidim an ox wearing a kapota and wearing all the Chassidic garb, but eating shont. But on the face they saw an ox. In other words, you could be externally dressed a certain way, you can behave a certain way, but your personality is such that it has not been refined internally. So you could eat kosher and not be kosher. What he saw in Rebecca, and what is a lesson to us in our search for a soulmate, is the sensitivity a person has to others. And not just to people, but to things, and in general, an attitude to life. I know I may be minimizing the playing field here. By the time I finish here, you're not going to find anyone that matches any of this. So I have final words to say about that. So don't leave before I finish my final statement. The third thing, remember, after all, we are talking about Rebecca and Sarah. They were pretty high level. It's a standard here. The question is aspiring to the standard, not just being there, which I shall share in a moment. The third final thing is the way the Rashi says, the cloud that hovered. The anon kashur ala oil. The words are the cloud. A cloud is symbolic of an aura. An aura. Now, what is an aura? Well, you hear about it. Sometimes it's associated with light. When we say a person gives off an aura, a glow, a vibe, I mean, there are a lot of words that you can use for it. Energy. Right. So this is something which is an intangible, but it's clearly seen. Children especially are very sensitive to the vibe a person gives off. They sense an enemy, they sense love. They may not be able to protect themselves, but they definitely sense it. As we get older, we may become more callous, we don't always sense it, but there are auras that we all sense, especially if you yourself are in a more sensitive place. So it's like, if you're sensitive, you sense sensitivity. An aura is a certain beauty that is hard to describe. It's not physical beauty. It's something that is beyond the physical per se. And nevertheless, it's as real as it gets, and it reflects on something very real. The context that it's used here in Rashi and in the Talmud, in Rebecca and Sarah, so I mentioned before, Taras Mishpacha. The word is called purity, literally family purity, which some people think is some type of euphemism, some type of cryptic description. We call the concept of I mentioned before, the sanctity within sexuality. So let me tell you what an aura is, especially in context of sexual energy, which of course is a key component to any relationship. And that doesn't just mean when two people are having a physical relationship, it's also sexual energy when you meet people. People give off energy, different types of energy. So what I'm going to say now is more elaborated upon in my book, Toward a Meaningful Life, in the chapter on intimacy, if you want to read more about it. But briefly, the point is this. In the Torah, there is no word for sexuality. The word is intimacy. As a matter of fact, the sexual act or sexuality is called in the Torah knowledge, to know. And Adam knew Eve. And this word knowledge is used many times. When it says Adam knew Eve, it means they had an intimate relationship. Now, why is the Torah afraid of using a more graphic word? No, it's not the point. The Torah is talking about what a true sexual relationship is. sexuality, which is of course today seen a certain way, has been unfortunately divorced from intimacy. Not for everyone, but some people even pride themselves. I have friends who tell me how they pride themselves that for them sexuality, they've mastered the art of having sexual relationships without commitment. They see it as a mastery of an art. Sexuality has become very technique-oriented. It's become very goal-oriented. Now, all this sexuality is a very mysterious force in our lives and has a lot of power, and there's no question there's pleasure related to it. Maybe the greatest of all. Some people, it's the hunt is almost as great as the destination. And the whole process, there are even theorists and thinkers who say that 90% or 100% of modern culture is all around sexuality. So there would be no museums and no bars and no clubs and no theaters if you didn't need to have that whole setup. You know, like I read an evolutionary theorist writing that this is a quirk of nature that he can't explain, because bacteria don't need this whole courting process. You know, they need to mate in order to survival of the fittest, in order to perpetuate the species. It's humans that created this ridiculous type of courtship and developed this $1 trillion industry of restaurants and wine and bars and everything just for one purpose, that nature should get two people together in order to perpetuate the species. We've become such sophisticated bacteria, and he says he doesn't know where the bacteria picked up that nature that it needs to have this so-called romance. No, there are people that write this. They say romance is an absolute mistake of nature, and because it doesn't have any benefit. If people were just as if we were just as had the animal bliss of bacteria as we make, we wouldn't need all this stuff. There are theorists like this. Anybody embrace that theory? Yeah. Not so. It's not so geschmack, right? It's not so pleasant. You don't embrace it. Okay, good. One this person doesn't. Okay.
No. I'm saying I do agree with romance. Absolutely.
I understand.
To be clear.
So, from a Torah point of view, it doesn't allow sexuality ever to get divorced from its heart and soul. The soul of sexuality is intimacy. It's two people, as the Torah puts it, not just giving each other mutual pleasure, and not just satisfying instant gratification, or whatever it is that how people define sexuality, but it is about knowing each other, and ultimately knowing God. That's the most beautiful part of it. As the Torah puts it, two souls, and this is the root of a soulmate. Where do we get the concept from? The Zohar says like this, that when Adam and Eve were created, they were created as one. Oh, the Bible actually says this, man and woman. It was an androgynous creature, actually. God split them into two, and the rest of their lives they search for each other, to become one, I guess, for oneness. They're searching for unity, not just the unity of their own soul, but the unity with all of the cosmos, and the unity with God himself, or herself, depending what dimension of God you're talking about. So essentially, the sexual energy, the sexual attraction that people have to each other is based on a soul attraction. It's not a physical. It manifests in physical ways, but its root is the search for wholeness, for unity. That's its ultimate purpose. Its purpose is not to get two people together to have a child so the species perpetuate itself. That's a secondary thing. Then God commands Adam and Eve that they should have children, multiply and have children. But the essence of a relationship is unity in that fullest sense of the word. Intimate unity. Now I can elaborate on this much. I'm getting signals here of the time. But I will say the following. So the third and final feature here that Isaac saw in Rebekah, and clearly Rebekah saw in Isaac as well, was healthy intimacy. In addition to physical, emotional, intellectual compatibility, there are two people that the Torah documents how they met, and they were able to find spiritual compatibility because they understood the nature of the soul, which is the flame, and all its qualities, the sensitivity to the material universe, and finally, sexual intimacy, not just sexuality, which by no means compromises sexuality. It's all-encompassing. It's that and much more. And those are the three ultimate virtues. The third one, I have to say, is probably the most elusive one in our times, because we've all been influenced in very profound ways of sexual attitudes. and it's not such an easy thing to change. Now, the other two, much easier to work on. The third one is a much deeper trap. So we'll have a follow-up in the coming weeks. I'll discuss that more in detail. But I wanted to say on a final note, in the practical terms, when you study art or music, even if you're a beginner, you're taught what the great masters achieved. Not to demoralize you that you'll never reach there, but to show you that's the highest standards of perfection human beings were able to achieve. You know, when you want to create a circle, you want to know what does the perfect circle look like. So you can juxtapose your circle over and say, you know, I'm pretty close. If you don't have a standard, what are you growing toward? As one of the Rebbe said, that the Torah, Chassidus, teaches you how small you are and how great you can become. There's some people know how great they can become, and that's all they live with. It's called the illusions of grandeur. And there's some people who know how small they are, and that's where they're trapped. And they don't feel they can ever move anywhere. A healthy balance of life, a humble balance, is to know both things. You have to know a destination, the heights. There's nothing wrong with dreaming. There's nothing wrong to have standards that may not be so easy to reach. That's what makes us human. We, just like I said with the flame, you're always yearning and reaching upward, defying gravity. On the other hand, it's also important to have some type of sober assessment of where you are, not to convince yourself you're already there. So you need both. So when we read about Rebecca and Isaac as a model for a relationship, this doesn't mean we have to find exactly what it says. You're talking about people who spent years of their lives, an unbelievable amount of effort and refinement, growing up in homes like Abraham and Sarah. You can imagine. You're talking about extraordinary human beings. People we can talk about 3,500 years later are not such a simple thing to emulate. Will someone talk about you in 3,500 years? That's what you can work on. So this is not meant. On the other hand, we are told in the Medrash, Mosai Yugiu. When will you reach the level of our own forefathers? Remember, you have the genes. All of us have the genes of Isaac and of Rebecca. They're in you. So though you may not reach it in the fullest sense of the word, but knowing the standard and understanding that the spiritual compatibility is something you want in your life, and that's a component that's necessary for finding your soulmate, just the knowledge, as I said earlier, the awareness of it, and the more you learn about what a soul is, the more powerful will be your ability to achieve that space. So I'm not suggesting here that it's about, going all or nothing. Nothing happens that way. It's a long, short road, remember. But the beginning of every journey starts with one step. And that one step is setting another standard, or maybe becoming aware of another standard. Trust me, you start learning about another standard, I speak from my own experience, it changes you. Because you suddenly see, I had my little world that I saw, and now I see a bigger world. And that bigger world lifts you there, causes you to be able to find other people that are lifted there. And that's how it works. The person that you need to meet in your life may not be able to even have a conversation with you right now because you're living with horizons that person is already beyond. Maybe you just need to lift your horizons and another person will emerge in your life that can have a conversation on that level. So we do have power in our lives. And there's no such thing as saying, I tried it all. That's ridiculous. That's like saying I reached the heights. Nobody's reached the heights. The higher you climb, the more there is to climb. So I want to conclude with a humble blessing of my own. That this discussion, even though is talking about soulmates, this just doesn't mean about those of us that are searching for a soulmate. Some of you may already have your soulmate. Some of you may be close to having. Some of you may be living with your soulmate and married for many years. These things are sometimes you have to rediscover. Like I mentioned with the couple that I began the story this evening with. They were with each other, but they did not know they were soulmates. So I want to say a blessing to everyone here. Those that have to find your soulmate, even if you don't make so much effort, God should just bless you. Maybe just hearing these words tonight should help you. But it wouldn't hurt if the more you add into the equation, the better it is. And those that already found something should know how to appreciate it and really discover the deeper dimensions of it. And as I said, I have my dancing shoes, so as soon as there's some movement or action, let me know, and I'll be there. So I want to conclude by saying that I want to wish everybody a very good evening. I want to say this class was dedicated by our good friend Mark in honor of the Yahrzeit of his beloved grandmother, Sarah Golda Bat Zev Wolf, on 19th of Cheshvan. So may, in honor of your grandmother, you discover your soulmate, as well as everybody here in this room. I will also say that just a few, if you allow me to make an announcement or two. Since there are some 20-somethings in this room, so there's I want to introduce my. That's my offspring, my son. Who tomorrow evening does a small group here, or not so small, depending on who comes. But I say 20-something. I will not be there, as you can imagine, for that reason. This is not meant to make anyone feel old or young. It's just the type of aura and vibe that. So if anybody's interested, he's good. I know I'm very subjective in saying that, but what do you got to lose? Try it out and let me know. So that's Mendel, my son, right here. As I mentioned last week, I also want to announce that now that we have the space and plenty of opportunities, if anybody wants to study or pursue subjects you heard here tonight, or any other for that matter, whether it's the parsha or text-based or subject matter, either in a small group or one-on-one, if you let me know, or Velvel is here somewhere, yeah. Please let us know, and I'll be happy we can help or orchestrate it. It'd be our honor. That's what this space is for, to create a space of socializing, study, communing, and maybe also soulmating thing. At least I don't call it breeding ground, that wouldn't be good. Environment. I didn't mean that. An environment. That's Velvet. Wave to everybody. Finally, I want to say tomorrow also Philip is giving his class at 7 o'clock. Mendel's is at 9. And next, I don't want to announce next week. Next is the fourth part of the cooking, Kabbalah cooking for women, the final part. But I will also say, if those of you that are not aware, on the 25th of December at night, Thursday night, 5th night of Hanukkah, in this big room here, we're going to have a drum circle. And it'll be quite an extraordinary evening. So if you want to participate in that, you can either mention it to Velvel, sign up, or do it online as well. And finally, we have, if you want to get announcements or the weekly email that I send out, just simply leave your email address. And there's more to come. I want to say that it's an honor always to speak to you and to listen to you. And I'm more than happy, as time provides, to be able to discuss, if any would like to discuss further this topic of soulmates. Obviously, it's not just a theoretical thing, it's about on the ground. And though, as I've said to many people, I'm not a shadchan per se, which means I'm not a matchmaker, but many matches have taken place in this environment here. Usually people meet and stuff like that. So if there's anybody you see in this room that you like and you're ashamed to go over to, I'll be happy to make an introduction. So everyone have a very good night. And the next Wednesday we shall be here again. It was a pleasure. Thank you.